Hello there. I am Koios the Rōnin BeatMaker. And welcome to Lounge Rōnin. Hello there. All things, everything. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe, ring that notification bell, and hit that like button. And please make sure to leave a comment with your thoughts below, as that will help me and the channel grow. And on this episode, we're going to discuss Shaka Zulu. Now, this will be a light introduction into the history of Shaka Zulu, so that if this historical figure piques your interest, you guys are more than willing to have a nice jump start to further your studies. And without further ado, let us get into it. Okay. This article was written September 7th, 2018, and was updated said day. Shaka Zulu. The story of a ruthless ruler. The Zulu monarch Shaka was a contemporary of the French Emperor Napoleon, and has even been dubbed the African Napoleon by some. However, apart from their reputation as great military leaders, history has remembered these two men quite differently. On the one hand, Napoleon, despite the wars he waged across Europe, has been considered by some as an elegant despot. Shaka, on the other hand, has been remembered more negatively as a ruthless and bloodthirsty madman. His name and a parasite, Shaka's beginnings. Those seeking an explanation for Shaka's brutality may begin with his childhood. According to popular belief, Shaka was the illegitimate child of Senju Kowana Kanjama, a minor Zulu chief, and Nandi. It is said that Shaka was conceived when the two engaged in uku hulbonga, a form of sexual foreplay without penetrative sex that was allowed to unmarried couples. Fascinating. So if you think about it, even at those times, they did not believe in premarital sex, which I think is is very noble and a beautiful thing to think about. The level of uh, self-awareness to the social impact, as well as the political impact um, that premarital sex could have in these empires of large scale, I should say. Really, it's fascinating because you see it nowadays with how society, with the amount of men and women that have engaged in premarital sex, and how that has correlated to a substantial decrease in marriages, healthy marriages, or even long-lasting marriages, especially with the level of promiscuity that you know promiscuity the level of wilding out you see with women nowadays in modern society. It's quite telling, and this is very revealing. So, uh, really fascinating. This was meant to release sexual tension between young people and prevent pregnancies from happening. In the case of Senjogawana and Nandi, however, the rules were broken. When Nandi's pregnancy was discovered, a formal indictment was sent to Shengagowana. The chief, however, dismissed the news and said that Nandi's menstrual irregularity was caused by an intestinal parasite known as the Aishaka. Nevertheless, Nandi gave birth several months later, and Senjogawana was told to collect Nandi and her son. The child was called Shaka, a corruption of the parasite's name. Wow. Now that's one hell of an origin story. As a child, Shaka herded sheep for his father. When the young Shaka allowed a dog to kill one of the sheep, his father was furious. Nandi, however, defended her son. As a result, both mother and son were banished from Kraal, a traditional African village of huts. Here we have an illustration of a Zulu kraal, 1849. For the next few years, Shaka and his mother wandered from one kraal to another, often treated with abuse and derision. Around 1803, Shaka and his mother finally found refuge in the Mithwa hegemony, a kraal belonging to the religion's dominant power group. The Mithwa throne was occupied by King Dingwaso, who built up a federation of 50 tribes through diplomacy and warfare. It was under this king that Shaka's fortunes began to take a turn for the better. A turn of fortunes. Shaka becomes a warrior. At the age of 16, Shaka became the king's senior herd boy due to his intelligence, courage, and resolution. According to one story, Shaka once stood his ground against a leopard attacking the herd. He single-handedly killed the beast, thus earning the praise and a cow from Dingsweo. The fierce competition between the herders of the region for the scarce grazing ground meant that conflict was almost inevitable. Dingiswayo prepared for this by organizing his youths into regiments based on their age groups. Shaka was soon recruited as a warrior, and his regiment was known as the Izkwe, Bushmen. Shaka was equipped with the standard weapons of that region, an oval shield and 3 assegai, light spears for throwing. He wore a kilt of fur stripes, a skin cape with black widowed bird plumes, cowhide sandals, white oxtail at the wrists and ankles. So here we have a sketch of a Zulu warrior wearing traditional clothing and using standard weaponry. 1913. Battles between the tribes of the region at that time usually began with two bodies of warriors facing each other at a distance between 35 to 45 meters. That's 115 to 148 feet. Then each side would cast their light spears at the enemy and then return those that were already hurled. The battle was over when one side had enough and fled. If the victors gave chase, the routing warrior could have their lives spared by dropping their weapons, thus signifying their surrender. This form of combat seemed pointless and ineffective to Shaka, as the light spears were thrown at a distant foe usually did not do much damage. A new way to battle with a new weapon. Shaka decided to change the way battles were fought. Instead of hurling spears from a distance, he decided to close in on the enemy and engage in melee combat. When the opponent threw their spears, he would parry them with his shield. Then he would charge forward, hook the enemy's shields aside with his own, and stab the warrior to death with his light spear. To make himself a more effective warrior, Shaka discarded his cowhide sandals as they hampered his movements. Additionally, Shaka designed a new type of spear for combat, as the light throwing spears were rather fragile when used to strike or stab an enemy. This resulted in a spear with a massive blade attached to a stout, short handle. This was called the ikwa, a reference to the sound made when it thrust and pulled out from a victim's body. Damn. Shaka is also credited with refining the existing military formation into the now well-known buffalo horns formation. This formation consisted of a head, main body, horns, flanking forces, and loins reverses. Here we have an illustration of a Zulu warrior with a equasphere, 1898. You know, what's fascinating is you know, his ability to essentially change the warfare and adapt. I think that's one thing that's interesting when it comes to paralleling with the Spartans and how, because the Spartans were reluctant to adapt and evolve their form of weaponry and arsenals, that led to their demise. However, in for Shaka Zulu, it's the opposite. By discarding a ill effective form of fighting and evolving to be more aggressive, you see him being able to then conquer more tribes and local chieftains. And it's like, what I find also really interesting about it is the fact that imagine being those opposite forces and seeing this new form of warfare and not really understanding how to comprehend it. And I'm sure that both sides were well versed in melee and hand-to-hand combat, but I think it took another level with Shaka and his warriors, as their main purpose was to get up close and personal, which forced the other side to adapt themselves or be destroyed. And more likely than the case, I would speculate, they would be destroyed because they probably weren't mentally, and or as physically fit for that type of close quarters combat, because that was not the lay of the land for let's say generations or decades. So it's really interesting to see how, these small changes in warfare, or even these larger changes in warfare, completely, change courses of history. And I think that's something that we should all kind of look to the past in terms of how they innovated warfare to, look to how they will in the future. Now we essentially have throwing spears. They're just called drones. They're called kamikaze drones. Those are our throwing spears now. It's really interesting. It's fascinating. But enough of a Rōnin rant. Let's continue. A rise to power for the increasingly cruel Shaka Zulu. Over the years, Shaka defeated other chiefs and enlarged the territory controlled by the Zulus. Shaka also became an increasingly brutal and mad. For instance, it is said that he would have his warriors clubbed to death upon the merest sign of weakness. Interesting. Sounds like some space marines. In addition, those who had treated his mother and him badly in the past were condemned to brutal deaths. Oh, the bill comes due. Furthermore, he neither took a legal wife nor fathered a son, paranoid that an heir would plot against him. If a concubine became pregnant, she was executed. Wow. Thousands of his subjects were massacred when his mother died, so that their families would mourn along with him. Shaka's madness caused those close to him to fear for their lives. Good Lord. I'm not sure how much of that is necessarily accurate. Like I said, this is a light introduction for everybody, so please, feel free to do your own personal studies on some of these accounts. Oh, well, look at this. Here we go. How much of his story is true? In 1828, his half brother, Dingawe, assassinated Shaka, buried the body in an unmarked grave, and assumed the throne. Although Shaka's brutality and insanity is well known today, it is unclear how much of his life story is true. For instance, it has been argued that there is really little evidence to support the veracity of the story surrounding his birth and childhood. Here we have an illustration of a muster and dance at Shaka's kraal in 1827. To an extent, Shaka continues to receive the traditional Zulu reverence towards a dead monarch, as in a praise song in which he has been called Shaka the Unshakable. Interesting. Let's continue. Moreover, as the sources for Shaka's life are derived from earlier variable Zulu storytellers or biased white chronicles of the colonial era. I want to repeat that for everybody. Moreover, as the sources of Shaka's life are derived from either variable Zulu storytellers or biased white chroniclers of the colonial era, it may just be possible that his brutality has been exaggerated and that there may also be a rational explanation for his insanity, though it now remains lost to history. So that's something important for everyone to keep note of if you further your studies into Shaka Zulu. You should really be mindful of who's the author of those studies, and if you can really trust the veracity of their accounts and descriptions. And that's the thing about, the unfortunate truth and the fascinating truth is that, there are white historians out there that better understand and know Black history than Black people themselves. Uh, so it's something to really keep in mind out there, unfortunately. But, this is the world that we live in. A lot of ignorance is bliss, and ignorance is education nowadays. So just something to keep in mind for everyone out there listening. Nevertheless, a fascination with Shaka has placed the Zulu leader in the spotlight for several books and even a television series. It was recently announced that the Southbound Productions, has begun working on a 12-part series discussing his influences, allies, and enemies, titled Shaka Mbe. The three planned seasons are said to be created with a global audience in mind. The production company aims for the series to be like an African Game of Thrones. The creators have a team of consultants, including historians, traditional leaders, oral custodians, and royal advisors, with desires to tell Shaka's story as accurately as possible. And there you have it, a light introduction into Shaka Zulu. Now, I've been listening to Shaka Atmos. Um, he's on YouTube. I highly recommend everyone out there, if you're really interested in knowing the true history of Egypt, of Black history, to give his channel a listen. Because he was talking about the origins of. I was listening to his lecture last night, and he was talking about the origins of Egypt and you can almost say the replacement of native Africans of Egypt by the Arabs, by the Caria, and kind of learning about the history of these um, Libyans and their infiltration within Egypt, and taking and replacing the Kanji. I'm pronouncing it wrong. The warrior class of Egypt. And what's really fascinating about listening to his lectures is just you're learning how I like to describe it, the true history. And the reason why I'm kind of bringing this up and kind of wrapping things up for everybody is that, like, we don't really know the true history of our past. And when it comes to individuals like Shaka Atmos, you are provided with the true history that is unbiased, and the history that I've been being fortunate to be educated on through his lectures, allows me to be able to read these light introductions, read these articles with a more open mind, and kind of being able to kind of catch the bias. I'm not saying I'm some smart guy or anything like that, but I think for anyone out there, when you start understanding how to read history, it makes it a lot easier to kind of catch the BS or the nuances. And I think for all of us, that's something that we really should be develop skills in, is being able to read history. Because when we're able to actually read and articulate history and the true history of that, we're able to understand the present, and we're able to navigate the future. Because many of the situations that we are currently experiencing right now, especially when it pertains to Western society, was happening in the past. The Romans, they were painting silver coins gold to inflate their own value of their own currency. We do the exact same thing when it comes to just printing money. So these are things that we should all really kind of take into consideration when we want to understand what's going on right now, because we live in a cycle. Cat Williams kind of said it eloquently. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but in his interview with Joe Rogan. But we history is a cycle, and when you're able to see the cycle of history, you're able to step through it. You're able to navigate it. And I want that for all of us, because, we live in very uncertain times right now. And, with the recent, outages that we're getting in terms of social media or communications, this is a very inflammatory year. And I highly recommend people out there to, start saving up on a lot of knowledge and history, physically. Things that you really enjoy reading, whether it's articles, whether it's cookbooks, history books, anything of that matter. Because I just want to have you guys be aware that if if they shut off the internet and they turn it back on, it's not going to be the same internet that we had beforehand. So I really think people out there should really start investing in physical copies of books, hard driving any articles or online stuff that you really enjoy. Because, things are getting weird and they don't like people knowing history and the true history and being able to call out and predict many of the machinations that we are currently experiencing as it is right now. So, just something for everyone to keep in mind and just to think about while moving forward. And just to be mindful of the present and to study the past because that's the only way that you can survive the future. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. If you are new to the channel, well, hello there. Thank you for stopping by. And I did take a shower, mind you. Miss Space Cake. If you have enjoyed this episode, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Shout out to my YouTube viewers. Much love to Miss Space Cake 420 for stopping by. Shout out to my Rumble viewers and my Twitch viewers and my Kick. And much love over to Twitter as well. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.